The disabled tyrant's beloved pet fish. Transmigration. Chapter 28. When Jingwang pulled out the crystal bottle, Wang Shi, who was standing not far behind him, immediately stepped forward like an arrow and placed a small coral-engraved fish bowl on the table in front of him. The fresh water was already prepared. Jingwang drew up his sleeve and placed the fish into the water himself, then watched the fish swim around freely for a while. Jingwang gave a look at Wang Shi, indicating that he wanted to feed the fish. Wang Shi knowingly pulled out a bamboo box filled with fish food and handed it to Jingwang. Then, he turned and gave some eye gestures towards the other servants. The servants brought up the desserts that they've carried all the way from the Jing estate and placed them one by one in front of the fish bowl. Jingwang picked out 2 grains of fish food and threw them into the fish bowl. Then he pulled out a peach blossom cookie, squeezed half of it into pieces and shared it with Xiaoyu while he nonchalantly ate the remaining half. The crowd, who was bored and had nothing better to do than attentively watch Jingwang feeding a fish. Everyone felt like they were going blind. So, Jingwang was this kind of a person? After Jingwang placed Li Yu into the fish bowl, Li Yu immediately rubbed cutely against his master's fingers. Then the fish food and peach blossom cookies came down. The little carp, who's been favoring the new and bored with the old recently, first only picked the peach blossom cookies and ate them gluttonously. Eating until his stomach was half full, Li Yu then went to eat the fish food. Seeing that the little fish was eating happily, Jingwang picked out a mooncake and broke it into pieces to feed the fish. Lately, Li Yu was very willing to try new foods. He smacked his lips and gave it a taste. The new cake had a minty flavor which rushed straight to his head. A person might like this, but a fish couldn't handle it. After Li Yu took a bite, he abandoned it and returned to happily eating the peach blossom cookies. This was how Jingwang knew his fish didn't like mooncake. There's no need to prepare mooncake in the future. Wang Gonggong, who can be practically called the parasite that lived in Jingwang's stomach, immediately ordered some servants to record this. The servants all nodded their heads in unison. The people seated around Jingwang were very dazzled by this scene. Only Ye Qinghuan remained unaffected. Amidst the sound of traditional instruments, the second prince Mu Tianzhao got up. As per the arrangement of the Ministry of Rites, the second prince, being the oldest prince, needed to represent all the princes and propose a toast in the honor of the king of Jinju at this national banquet. Poised and dignified, Mu Tianzhao properly raised a toast for the king of Jinju. The king of Jinju praised Mu Tianzhao generously and drank 3 cups in succession. The emperor was quite satisfied by Mu Tianzhao's performance. When the king of Jinju complimented the second prince, the emperor felt glad. Being able to act appropriately on the occasion was one of the second prince's strengths. Mu Tianzhao could feel the emperor's good mood. With a smile, he looked at the dainty figure beside the king of Jinju. Lately he's been suffering defeat repeatedly and slowly losing the emperor's favor. Earlier, the spy he had placed in Ganking Palace reported that the reason why the king of Jinju came to visit the emperor this time was because he was arranging a political marriage for this young princess. Mu Tianzhao had spent a lot of effort to repair his relationship with Jingwang. However, Jingwang couldn't care less about him. Mu Tianzhao also wanted to win over the Duke of Chang'an. However, Jingwang and the Chang'an Palace were tied together on the same rope. Since he failed to win over Jingwang's support, the Chang'an Palace also treated him coldly and indifferently. Mu Tianzhao heard that the third prince had successfully sent a concubine to Jing estate. He was afraid that the third prince would be one step ahead of him in gaining the support of Jingwang and consequently, the support of Chang'an Palace. He was not positive that he could ever win over Jingwang, so he needed to find other support for himself. However, he could not do it so obviously, after all the emperor was watching him. At this time, a marriage alliance came knocking on his door. Mu Tianzhao schemed well in his heart. Although Jinju was a small border nation, they had money and soldiers. If he married the princess of Jinju, Jinju definitely wouldn't leave him to support the other princes. With this, even if the emperor disliked him, it would not be so easy to shake his position. As for the princess of Jinju herself, to be his concubine was already an enormous honor for her. He could promise to grant her the title of imperial consort once he ascended the throne. The princess of Jinju definitely won't oppose this. Mu Tianzhao originally thought that in order to obtain the aid of Jinju, even if the young princess was extremely ugly, he would take her. However, after taking a quick glance at her at the banquet, he found this princess had the countenance of a flower and face like the moon. She was rather pretty indeed. Compared to the women of his nation, she had a different kind of charm. Mu Tianzhao was already extremely willing to take her. Princess. Mu Tianzhao ordered someone to bring up a plate of dessert and said gently, "This is our nation's famous butterfly pastry. Please try it." As the name implied, the pastry was made in the shape of a butterfly spreading its wings. Moreover, the pastry was made in pairs to symbolize marriage blessing for couples to live long and happy lives together. Mu Tianzhao wanted to create the impression that the princess of Jinju already belonged to him so as to dissuade others who had intentions towards this foreign princess. The emperor also saw this from where he sat at his throne. The second prince was most likely interested in this foreign princess. The emperor originally planned to have the heir of Chang'an Palace marry the princess of Jinju. However, seeing Xuěshān's solemn expression while accepting the imperial edict earlier, the emperor thought that the other didn't seem to be interested in the princess. Therefore, the emperor wanted to sound out Xuěshān's intentions first. At the very least, he still needed to discuss it with the Duke of Chang'an. This is why he hadn't directly bestowed the marriage edict. Who would have imagined that the second prince would suddenly show his interest? The emperor was a little dissatisfied. But on second thoughts, the second prince probably didn't know of his intentions, so he couldn't blame the other rashly. He already rejected the notion of marrying the princess of Jinju to any of his sons before. However, if the second prince really wanted to run headfirst into this wall, and if the princess of Jinju was willing to yield and become the second prince's concubine, the emperor wouldn't say no. If the second prince wanted this marriage, then he needed to bring out a suitable and successful plan of action. The emperor wanted to see how Mu Tianzhao would deal with this matter, so he purposely did not interfere at this time. The king of Jinju ordered servants to bring the butterfly pastry in front of the princess. The young princess only smiled but didn't reach out to take the dessert. Mu Tianzhao assumed that this princess didn't know the meaning of the butterfly pastry and wanted to take the opportunity to show off a bit. Suddenly, however, he discovered that the princess of Jinju wasn't even looking his way. Her charming face kept peering far off into the distance. Mu Tianzhao. Mu Tianzhao felt somewhat embarrassed and didn't rush to speak again. His gaze, however, uncontrollably followed the princess's line of sight. Then, he saw that Jingwang was feeding the fish with a tableful of desserts placed in front of him. The fish was even resting on the edge of the fish bowl, waving its tail. So, the princess was looking at the fish, and it was the fish that would always cause trouble whenever the second prince encountered it. Every time the fish waved its tail, the princess would reflexively smile. Mu Tianzhao was secretly annoyed. Afraid of losing his manners, after he learned that Jingwang brought the fish over, he did his best to pretend that the fish did not exist. However, this fish, who was completely incompatible with him, once again intruded his view. The princess of Jinju was giggling so hard that her face had turned crimson. Occasionally she would whisper quietly with the king of Jinju. The second prince only heard the word fish softly but was unable to hear anything else. However, that was enough. He was very certain that this damn fish had already stolen his thunder. The princess of Jinju also had bad tastes. How could a fish raised by a mute be comparable to him, the future crown prince? Mu Tianzhao's eyes flitted over to the emperor. The emperor also noticed that Jingwang was feeding his fish because of the activity from over there. However, not only did the emperor not scold Jingwang for his behavior, but instead, he held a smile as if he was very happy to see Jingwang looking after his fish. In Mu Tianzhao's heart, the densely packed vine known as jealousy grew madly. He was the properly behaving second prince, the future crown prince. Yet it seemed as if he couldn't win against a mere fish. Mu Tianzhao sat back with a gloomy face. His heart was filled with panic that he was stunned for a while. Still, no one paid attention to him. Then, the second prince gave some instructions to the servant responsible for bringing him food. The servant received the order and went out. Not long after, they returned carrying a bowl in their hands. The bowl was filled with soup. The servant knelt down trembling with trepidation as he said, "Your Highness, the kitchen didn't prepare carp fish soup today. They need time to boil it so it won't be ready for a while." This servant was afraid Your Highness couldn't wait, so I grabbed a bowl of white tofu soup. Please have some of it. Although the servant spoke softly, it didn't stop people from staring at the second prince. Mu Tianming, who sat not far from the second prince, deliberately said in a loud voice, "Second elder brother, is the food at the banquet not to your taste? How come you suddenly want to drink carp fish soup?" Mu Tianming purposely shouted out the word carp. Afterwards many of the guests looked at the second prince in shock, then they all turned their eyes towards Jingwang. This was because in this scene, Jingwang had his pet carp next to him. Liu lifted his head from the fish bowl and shook it regretfully. "Aya, how embarrassing. The second prince probably wanted to make him into soup. But he was fine and dandy here by his master's side munching on stuff." Mu Tianzhao felt Jingwang's ice-cold gaze on him and explicably felt panicked. But clearly, he didn't even do anything. Mu Tianzhao clenched his teeth and scolded, "Third brother, you're overthinking things. I only suddenly wanted to drink some soup." The second prince felt his heart twisted terribly inside of him. Was people even going to criticize him for wanting to drink fish soup now? Jingwang continued to give Mu Tianzhao a cold look. Wang Shi stood to the side without saying a word. However, he already internally cursed out the second prince on Jingwang's behalf. The emperor furrowed his brows. Drinking fish soup was not a big deal normally. However, since Jingwang brought over his pet fish, that the second prince was intentionally targeting him couldn't be more apparent. Perhaps even the second prince didn't think that his action won't be exposed by the third prince in a fit of pique. The emperor loved the house and everything in it, and he had a very good impression of the little carp. Even he felt that second prince was being rather rude. The princess of Jinju was just watching the fish that Jingwang raised. Looking at it several times from afar, she liked it a lot. After knowing that the second prince wanted to drink fish soup, the young princess immediately jumped up and said angrily, "Your Highness the second prince, the fish is so cute, yet your honored self want to drink fish soup right in front of it." Who would have thought that the second prince was this kind of person? The princess of Jinju somewhat disdained the butterfly pastry that the second prince gave her just now. Despite her young age, she already saw through the second prince's schemes towards her and towards Jinju. She was also aware that if she married the second prince, she could only become a concubine. The princess of Jinju wasn't dumb. Jinju's strength can help the second prince obtain the throne, but in exchange, she would only receive a useless concubine position. It wasn't worth it. Moreover, whether the second prince can ascend the throne and when he will ascend the throne were all uncertain. Jinju didn't want to get dragged into the fight between the imperial princes so easily. Therefore, the princess of Jinju completely ignored the second prince. After learning that the second prince secretly wanted to drink fish soup, other people didn't want to say it out loud, but the fearless young princess just had to jump out and step on the second prince painfully a few times. This was also to express towards the emperor that she didn't want to marry the second prince. "Don't even think about it. Princess, it's a misunderstanding. It's not like that." Mu Tianzhao became temporarily speechless. Another fire of fury burned in his heart, but he didn't even know how to explain himself. What was he supposed to say? It's not that he wanted to drink fish soup in front of this fish, but rather, he wanted to slaughter this fish and make it into fish soup. The emperor could see very clearly that the princess of Jinju had no interest in the second prince. It's best to discourage the second prince from using some other inappropriate plans. To put it nicely, he already failed to win the princess' favor. To put it bluntly, it's a failed seduction attempt. The emperor felt that the amount of pride he felt for the second prince earlier was the exact amount of shame he felt because of him at the moment. Looks like Ye Qinghuan was more suitable after all. From afar, the emperor looked at the silent Ye Shizi sitting next to Jingwang. He quietly gave Ye Shizi a mature and steady label in his heart. He planned to have the Duke of Chang'an and Ye Shizi stay behind after the state banquet to have a private talk. Later on, the second prince received the news that the emperor was intending to bestow the marriage alliance with the princess of Jinju to the heir of the Chang'an palace, and that he was already having the discussion with the Duke of Chang'an about it. So these people were actually in cohorts. While he was completely humiliated at the state banquet and received nothing in return. The princess of Jinju rejected him. The Duke of Chang'an didn't want to support him. Even Jingwang, as well as Jingwang's fish, were all laughing at him. The second prince felt like he already endured long enough. He really couldn't take it anymore. He needed to do something about this. End chapter. The disabled tyrant's beloved pet fish. Transmigration. Chapter 29. With a cold face, Ye Qinghuan placed a stack of secret reports in front of Jingwang. Ye Shizi was usually friendly and cordial. To place down the secret reports with this kind of gloomy expression, it made Liu, who was swimming back and forth inside the fish tank, stop what he was doing and fear that if he were distracted for even 1 second, he would miss an important detail. After the state banquet, the emperor had Ye Qinghuan and his father, Duke of Chang'an, stayed behind. Ye Qinghuan was very cautious and restrained during the banquet, ensuring that he wouldn't stand out at all. Yet in the end, he was still chosen by the emperor to marry the princess of Jinju. He can't help but admit that the unimaginable information in that letter were now starting to become a reality. The emperor wanted to have Ye Qinghuan marry the princess. Although he still sought the opinion of the Duke of Chang'an, this political marriage counted as a state matter. Ye Qinghuan was very clear that his father, Duke of Chang'an, was extremely devoted to the emperor and definitely wouldn't say anything in opposition. Therefore, his marriage was decided. However, Ye Qinghuan wasn't actually worried about married life. The letter had said that the second prince would frame him for killing the princess of Jinju. Obviously, the princess was another victim of this scheme. Ye Qinghuan had decided that he won't let the second prince prevail. As for whether the princess of Jinju would remain willing to accept this marriage after the second prince was dealt with, he would have to see how things would unfold. Ever since he received the letter, he started watching the second prince closely, as well as the sixth prince who was also mentioned in the letter. The second prince had an estate outside of the imperial palace. Ever since Ye Qinghuan's marriage was arranged by the emperor, many of Mu Tianzhao's subordinates started entering and exiting that place more frequently. The second prince was definitely planning something. With Jingwang's occasional warnings, Ye Qinghuan started to not only believe the content of the letter but had started to treat it very seriously. The closer it corresponded to reality, the more he became prepared. Very quickly, his people figured out the second prince's plans. On the day that Ye Qinghuan and the princess of Jinju princess would enter the imperial palace to express their gratitude to the emperor for this marriage edict, the second prince planned to lure the princess of Jinju to come to Yanyu Pavilion where she would be killed. Then, he planned to trick Ye Qinghuan to come as well to take the blame. As soon as Ye Qinghuan stepped into Yanyu Pavilion, he would find his fiancée's dead body with his own sword pierced through her chest. The second prince planned to have someone steal the sword from the Chang'an palace ahead of time and use it as hard evidence to prove that Xuěshān had killed the princess. At that time, the second prince would lead a group of imperial guards and rush into Yanyu Pavilion to apprehend Xuěshān at the scene of the crime. Having been caught in the act, Xuěshān would be unable to explain himself. The second prince's plans to frame Xuěshān to destroy the marriage alliance and killing the princess matched up to a large portion to the content of the letter. However, there were things that didn't match up. The letter said that the sixth prince would also do something midway and wanted Xuěshān to not trust the sixth prince easily. Yet Xuěshān only managed to find information regarding the second prince. The sixth prince didn't seem to be doing anything at all. In comparison to the second prince who loved to put on a performance all the time, as well as the third prince who practically wanted to fight with the second prince every single moment of the day, this sixth prince was basically non-existent. Even at such an important occasion as the state banquet, the sixth prince didn't even attempt to look good in front of the emperor. Xuěshān was even somewhat suspecting that maybe there was a mistake in the letter. After all, seeing all of the misspelled words in the letter, it was already a miracle that Xuěshān had the patience to finish reading the entirety of the letter and understand everything. However, since the sixth prince didn't do anything like the letter had mentioned, they couldn't figure out who the sixth prince planned to harm. After some discussion, Jingwang and Xuěshān decided to still have people watch the sixth prince closely. In addition, they also discovered that the second prince had secretly prepared arsenic, clearly planning to poison someone. Yet at the moment, they weren't clear who was the target of this poison. In any case, it was definitely not to poison the princess of Jinju because the princess of Jinju would have to die by being stabbed with the sword of the heir of Chang'an Palace for his scheme to work. The poison seemed unnecessary. After Xuěshān made the necessary arrangements on his end, the emperor's imperial edict for the marriage very quickly arrived on the same day as the Dragon Boat Festival. Therefore, the day for Xuěshān to enter the imperial palace to express his gratitude had come at last. On Jingwang's side, he promised to enter the imperial palace together with Xuěshān. On the day of the imperial audience, Jingwang got up early and put on some casual and easy-to-move-in clothes. On his head, he wore an ink-black hair crown and wore an outer robe of sapphire blue with silver trimmings. Normally when people entered the imperial palace, they were not allowed to carry swords. However, as an imperial prince, Jingwang not only carried a sword on his waist, he also calmly stuffed a dagger into his cloud-printed boot, looking very much like he was about to fight to the death with the second prince. Liu swam anxiously back and forth inside the fish tank. He also wanted to go. Now that Jingwang hadn't gotten together with the pampered concubine, the premise of Chang'an Palace supporting the third prince no longer exist. Would the second prince and the sixth prince still act according to the original novel? Liu really wasn't sure at all. Moreover, what if there were some details that he didn't take notice of when he was reading the novel? For example, Liu couldn't remember at all the name of the imperial princess that died because of the sixth prince. In the original novel, it was only mentioned in a passing sentence, she didn't even count as a cannon fodder. Therefore, he could only simply warn Xuěshān to pay attention to the sixth prince. He believed that with Xuěshān and Jingwang's combined force, they definitely would be able to stop the sixth prince in case he really planned something. Liu only wanted to stay by Jingwang's side to obtain first-hand information just in case. Originally, he thought Jingwang would bring him. Yet Jingwang never took out the crystal bottle. Without the crystal bottle, it meant that Jingwang wasn't planning to bring him along. If he couldn't enter the imperial palace together with Jingwang, he definitely couldn't enter it by himself as a fish. Liu swung his tail and jumped from the crystal tank to a teacup. After jumping from one teacup to another, he aimed to jump into the crystal bottle on the table. However, the crystal bottle was polished and smooth and the jumping little carp's body was wet and slippery. Thus, before this fish could stabilize itself, it slid down from the bottle and almost hit its head on the ground. With keen eyes and swift reflexes, Jingwang grabbed the fish and placed it into a flower-shaped teacup. Liu, sob, sob, sob. Since he did not put him into the crystal bottle, didn't it mean that Jingwang was determined not to bring him? Liu jumped again. This time, he gathered the courage to jump onto Jingwang's shoulder, fish fins grabbing tightly onto Jingwang's robe. He felt like he transformed into a handsome eagle, one that can stand on top of its master's shoulder and help its master block the wind and rain. In actuality, the water-moist fish fins very quickly got Jingwang's shoulder all wet. Jingwang. Liu, who started to flail on Jingwang's shoulder, it's not like that. Jingwang wiped off the water droplets on his cheek and picked the fish up. After being a pet fish for so long, Liu was very aware that Jingwang was currently unhappy. Jingwang rarely picked him up by his head. Every time it happened was when something unpleasant had occurred. Was his master angry? The little carp, who made a mistake, pitifully used the tip of his tail to hook the other's fingers, trying to make Jingwang happy. However, because his fish head was held too firmly, he couldn't hook his tail onto Jingwang's fingers, so he could only revert to rubbing the other's palm. Jingwang. Jingwang thought Xiao that you wanted to go out and play. Perhaps, because he recently brought this fish everywhere, this fish must thought that he could play with it every day. However, he couldn't bring it tonight. He and Xuěshān might really get into a fight with the second prince's people. Bringing a fish was not only inconvenient, the fish itself wouldn't be able to handle it. Jingwang originally planned to temporarily leave Xiaoyu with Wang Shi. However, this fish not only tried to jump into the crystal bottle by itself, it even jumped onto his shoulder. Humph. Looks like it's been way too spoiled. It's really getting bold. Jingwang silently criticized the fish, thinking if he left the fish inside the estate, maybe the thief might come back to steal it again while he was away. Since he needed to utilize his subordinates during this palace visit anyways, he definitely needed to go to Jingtai Palace. Why not just bring the fish and leave it at Jingtai Palace? Wang Shi could come with them as well. Jingwang silently sighed and then yielded to putting the fish properly into the crystal bottle. Then, he went to change his clothes. Liu, who made a mistake but still managed to earn entry to the imperial palace as he wished, Success. Jingwang went to the imperial palace bringing his fish along. At the front of the palace gates, they came across Xuěshān. As he held the crystal bottle, Xuěshān also held onto Xiongfeng's leash. Xuěshān smiled and said, I knew you'd bring your fish along. I also brought Xiongfeng. While we're busy doing our business, Xiongfeng and Xiaoyu can keep each other company. Liu. No way. He also needed to do some business, not keep a dog company. Xuěshān had just finished speaking when Xiongfeng excitedly reached over with its dog head and used the tip of its nose to poke at the crystal bottle. Although this crystal bottle was bigger than a teacup, Liu felt like if Xiongfeng opened its mouth wide, it could still bite down on the bottle. Moreover, being licked through the thin layer of crystal wall, Liu felt like the dog's teeth were not far from him. Even if he was very familiar with Xiongfeng, Liu still felt somewhat nervous. Jingwang handed over the crystal bottle to Wang Shi. Wang Shi had cleaned out the porcelain fish bowl that the little carp had once used before inside Jingtai Palace and placed the fish inside it. Liu let out a breath of relief, finally feeling safer. Before entering the palace, Jingwang and Xuěshān already agreed to first ensure the safety of the princess of Jinju and make certain she won't really be harmed by the second prince. However, either of them had no interaction with the princess of Jinju prior to this, so it wasn't convenient to send someone over to warn them. Inspired by the letter sender, Jingwang ended up writing the princess of Jinju an anonymous letter, stating that there was someone secretly planning to hurt the princess. Jingwang came up with the main idea. Xuěshān was in charge of sending this letter. Shi was assigned to be responsible for the safety of the king and princess of Jinju anyways. If he brought the letter, no one would be suspicious. It was reported that when the king of Jinju received the letter, he immediately became furious and summoned his loyal advisors to examine this letter. Because he didn't know the intent of this letter and for the safety of his daughter, the king of Jinju had no choice but to summon skilled bodyguards to accompany the princess at all times, not even letting their guard down while entering the imperial palace to give thanks. The emperor didn't know the reason for this and only felt that the king of Jinju was being too cautious. The imperial palace was pretty safe. However, this was only an insignificant matter. The emperor was too lazy to dissuade the king of Jinju on this issue. At the moment, there were 16 skilled bodyguards beside the princess of Jinju at all times. And these were only the visible ones. There were even more hidden guards in the shadows. As long as the princess of Jinju was safe, it would be impossible for the second prince's plans to succeed. Also several days ago, the second prince's subordinates snuck into the Chang'an palace under Xuěshān's surveillance. In order to give the second prince a huge present, Xuěshān chose a very special sword and purposely allowed that sword to be stolen in order to make the second prince thought that everything was going according to his plans. After Jingwang and Xuěshān settled each of their pets, they started to wait. Not long afterwards, a loyal servant came to report that some unknown person attempted to get close to the princess of Jinju. They were seen through by the princess's guards, captured and beaten up severely. Jingwang and Xuěshān crossed gazes. They both guessed that this person was definitely sent by the second prince to lure the princess of Jinju away. About time. Xuěshān said softly. It's time to go to Yanyu Pavilion to meet the second prince. Jingwang gave Wang Shi a nod and stroked the little carp on the forehead. Then he brought his people and walked into the darkness of the night with Xuěshān. Li Yu watched as Jingwang left, staying inside the fish tank. He quickly analyzed the situation right now. How come the sixth prince didn't make any moves? Perhaps it's related to the fact that Jingwang and Chu Yanyu didn't get together. The third prince and sixth prince haven't obtained the support of the Chang'an palace yet, therefore, there was no need to take the risk taking them out of the picture. In other words, this should be the second prince's one-man show. But Li Yu didn't really understand why the second prince was still going through the scheme when the sixth prince had already withdrawn. Perhaps short-sighted and narrow-minded people always made the same decisions no matter what. Li Yu was thinking that he probably could only wait for news inside the Jingtai palace when he suddenly heard a soft click. Xiangfeng, who was laying down near the fish tank and seemingly asleep, vigilantly raised its head. It wasn't Wang Shi. Li Yu somewhat recognized Wang Shi's footsteps. Also, this sound came from the window. Wang Shi was inside the Jingtai palace. He couldn't have climbed through the window. With the light from a lit candle, Li Yu saw a black shadow jumping through the window. Who was it? Li Yu immediately recalled the female assassin from before and started to tremble all over. Xiangfeng was definitely worthy to be called a fish-guarding watchdog. It immediately started barking wildly. The figure dallied in front of the table for a while and then came over. Xiangfeng immediately pounced with a growl and bit the person bravely on the hand, making that person unable to bear the pain. What's going on? Wang Shi's voice traveled over. The guards in the surrounding area were also alerted. The black figure saw the situation was not good for him, so they instantly pressed down on their injury and returned where they came from. Wang Shi didn't manage to catch the person and was very frustrated. Fortunately, the fish and dog were both fine. Wang Shi grabbed a box of fish food from the table in relief and brought it over, planning to feed the two half-masters. Xiangfeng waved its tail and barked happily. Wang Shi poured the fish food on a jade plate. Xiangfeng was just about to take a bite when Li Yu recalled that the black figure did something in front of the table for a while. A strange feeling rose in his heart. Li Yu immediately swung his tail and hit a sapphire pearl that he usually played with at the jade plate. With extreme force, the pearl actually flipped the jade plate over and knocked the fish food to the floor. The little carp very rarely threw a fit like this. Wang Shi asked in surprise, "Master Xiao Yu, what's the matter?" Wang Shi's gaze immediately landed on the fish food on the floor. Then, he seemed to have thought of something. Could it be? Wang Shi quickly pulled out a silver needle from his pocket. No one would specifically test fish food for poison. Wang Shi was only afraid of something happening. It would be good if he was just overthinking things. The silver needle stabbed into the fish food. After a while, Wang Shi pulled it out. The tip of the needle turned black. Liu. The fish food was poisoned. Liu, sob, sob, sob. He was almost poisoned to death. How terrifying. Because this thing was mostly for him to eat, Liu can bet that someone planned to harm him. Wang Shi also very quickly thought of this. Now that Jingwang wasn't here, Wang Gonggong decisively ordered people to move Master Fish and Xiongfeng into another room without windows. He stood guard at the door himself, determined not to allow anyone else to sneak inside and take advantage of the situation. End chapter. The disabled tyrant's beloved pet fish. Transmigration. Chapter 30. On Ye Qinghuan's side, he also encountered the person that the second prince sent to lure him into the Yanyu pavilion. Jingwang gave Ye Qinghuan a look that served as a signal. Ye Qinghuan pretended to not know anything and followed behind that person. Jingwang led his trusted subordinates and followed them at a distance in order to avoid the second prince's people from noticing them. Sure enough, when they arrived in Yanyu pavilion, Ye Qinghuan saw a woman laying down on the floor with his sword piercing through her body. Soon afterwards, the second prince arrived leading a number of imperial guards. The second prince glanced at the dead woman and at the Jinju outfit she was wearing. Mu Tianzhao secretly felt very pleased with himself and purposely feigned a surprised tone as he exclaimed, "Ye Shizi, why would you be here? What did you do to the princess?" Ye Qinghuan was just about to answer when the emperor arrived in Yanyu pavilion in his golden dragon robes. This was also part of the second prince's schemes. The second prince privately informed the emperor that he heard Ye Shizi and the princess of Jinju were going to have a secret rendezvous at Yanyu pavilion. The emperor felt that although he already sanctioned their marriage, this was still completely inappropriate. So, he came over to scold them. Who would have thought he would come across murder case? What exactly is going on? The emperor's questioning gaze moved from the woman on the floor to Ye Qinghuan. Ye Qinghuan said in a calm and composed manner, "Answering your majesty, this subject had also just arrived. This subject has yet to figure out what happened." Then the second prince appeared. Mu Tianzhao felt that Ye Qinghuan's tone was somewhat strange, but after thinking some more, he didn't feel like there was anything that had gone wrong with his plans. Mu Tianzhao swept up all of the resentment gathered in his chest and reprimanded in return. Anyone with eyes could see what had happened. Ye Shizi had killed the princess. How could Ye Shizi want to deny it? The second prince pointed at the sword in the woman's chest and declared this should be Ye Shizi's sword, right? The emperor already realized the severity of the situation. Did the princess of Jinju really died and was killed by Ye Qinghuan? The emperor gave the order. An imperial guard went to examine the body. The second prince's words sounded rather plausible. Yet when the imperial guard examined the corpse, he discovered that this wasn't actually the princess of Jinju. Instead, it was only some woman who was wearing a Jinju attire. The emperor's severe expression shot over. The imperial guard temporarily moved to the side, not daring to speak. The sword in the woman's chest was also pulled out by the imperial guard and presented before the emperor. The sword that Ye Qinghuan used was something that the emperor had gifted him before. The emperor had a deep impression of it. This sword was extremely similar to the sword that Ye Qinghuan normally used. At first glance, the emperor also thought the sword belonged to Ye Qinghuan. Ye Qinghuan, is this not your sword? Presently, you have no other swords on you. The second prince saw success before his eyes and asked aggressively. Ye Qinghuan said calmly, "Your Majesty, the second prince seems to forget the rules of the imperial palace. As a state official, this subject cannot bring sword before you. This subject's sword has long been given to the entrance guard for safekeeping when the subject entered the palace. The emperor nodded his head. Since Ye Huan said this, the emperor immediately sent people to retrieve the sword. After waiting a while, an imperial guard carried Ye Shizi's sword over. Why were there suddenly two swords? This time, the second prince lost some of his composure. Ye Huan took the initiative to invite the emperor to examine it. The emperor carefully compared the two swords placed before him. Based on feelings, if the two swords were viewed separately, they were very similar. However, now that they were placed side by side, it was easier to see the difference. The sword that the guard retrieved shone with a clear silvery light. Yet the sword that was pulled out of the woman's body was heavy like iron, the blade looking rather ordinary. Which was real and which was fake was very apparent. Furthermore, a rather experienced imperial guard also noticed that this woman had actually died for several days and was not killed recently. With the sword also not belonging to Ye Huan, then the premise of Ye Huan killing someone was completely groundless. However, why were the two swords so similar? The emperor immediately thought that someone probably deliberately made the murder weapon to look like Ye Shizi's sword in order to frame him. The emperor recalled how the second prince immediately declared that this is Ye Shizi's sword and that Ye Shizi had killed the princess, while the reality was that the sword didn't belong to Ye Shizi and the princess didn't die. As a person who also experienced plenty of palace intrigues, the emperor immediately looked at the second prince with a changed impression. The emperor said apathetically, "Tianzhao, you entered the Yunyu pavilion and didn't even know that this woman was the princess of Jinju, so why did you insist the Ye Huan had killed the princess?" Mu Tianzhao was still in shock. Why did the emperor, who should be suspecting Ye Huan, was now suspecting him? This dead person in the Yunyu pavilion had to be the princess of Jinju. This was something he arranged earlier. How did it end up being somebody else? However, the emperor was waiting for his explanation now. Mu Tianzhao struggled to say, this imperial son saw the deceased woman wearing the Jinju attire, and thought it was the princess. The emperor gave him an ambiguous look and ordered the imperial guard to carry the deceased woman in front of the second prince. Mu Tianzhao finally saw clearly that the deceased woman was not the princess of Jinju as he expected, but instead was. Ye Huan smiled derisively as he said, although this woman is wearing Jinju clothes, the attire of an ordinary maid is still very different from that of the princess. Second prince, you must really have good eyesight to be able to recognize a maid as the princess with just one glance. Mu Tianzhao. Ye Shizi already ridiculed him so obviously. It was impossible for the emperor not to realize what the second prince had schemed. After all, wasn't it him who came up with scheme to make him come to Yanyu Pavilion at this time? Most likely the second prince failed to frame Ye Shizi and was grandly outmaneuvered by Ye Huan. At this moment, the emperor only felt anger and hatred towards the second prince. He was so annoyed that he really wanted to kick the second prince a few times, but he had to restrain himself. Since Ye Shizi and the princess of Jinju were unharmed, it was ill-advised to continue a deeper investigation. The king of Jinju was still in the imperial city. He couldn't let the king of Jinju learn that the second prince planned to harm the Jinju princess. Tianzhao, since you can't even recognize someone properly, you should stay well behaved in your estate and reflect on your actions. Without my orders, you're not allowed to come out. The emperor has never spoken so severely to the second prince before. It was only confinement, not any other punishment. Ye Huan understood very well that the emperor was probably going to let the second prince off. If Ye Huan had fallen to this scheme, the only outcome would have been death. Yet now that it was clear that the second prince was deliberately trying to frame him, the emperor still won't really do anything to the second prince. However, life was long. The second prince was unsuccessful in uprooting the Chang'an Palace, so he shouldn't blame Chang'an Palace for treating him as an enemy. There were plenty of methods to render someone powerless. Ye Huan was usually upright and honest, but it didn't mean that he wouldn't return the favor after getting hit in the face. If you hit me, I'll hit you back. This was how the world spun. Today was the stratagem that he and Jingwang arranged together. The deceased woman was only an unknown dead body from the imperial prison that they obtained in order to make the second prince complacent and let down his guard, thinking that things were all going according to his plans. The emperor personally comforted Ye Qinghuan with a few words. Ye Qinghuan also didn't persist on pursuing this matter. The emperor sighed in his heart. On the day of the state banquet, he had already felt that something was not right with the second prince. It's just that he never thought that the second prince would almost cause such huge trouble. Normally the second prince looked pretty capable. So how could he be so reckless over a mere political marriage? That if he can't have it, then he must destroy it? The emperor couldn't understand the second prince's grievance on this. However, the ruthlessness of this scheme against the Chang'an palace made the emperor somewhat wary. At this time, Jingwang slowly walked over. Seeing his other son, the emperor smiled tiredly as he said, "Tianqi, you also came." Mu Tianqi walked over and respectfully gave his greeting. Then, exceeding everyone's expectation, he silently pulled out a memorial tablet from in front of his chest. The emperor was just feeling odd about why Jingwang would suddenly pull out this kind of thing. For a split second, he was even displeased. Yet when he read the name on the memorial tablet, the emperor forcefully swallowed down all of his words of reprimand. Because this was Empress Yao Hui's memorial tablet, his first wife and Jingwang's birth mother. The emperor's original intent to keep the peace and patch up the dispute secretly was instantly crushed into dust by this memorial tablet. He finally remembered which family the Chang'an estate was. This was the clan that Empress Yao Hui came from, her birth family. If Empress Yao Hui were still alive, would he still let the second prince go so easily? Right now Jingwang was representing Empress Yao Hui and representing the Chang'an palace in seeking justice. The words that Ye Qinghuan couldn't say out loud, Jingwang was saying instead. "Tianqi, I understand your meaning." The emperor rubbed his brows. "You and Ye Qinghuan are both dismissed. Let me think about it carefully again." Ye Qinghuan immediately tugged Jingwang out of Yanyu Pavilion. Even he didn't expect Jingwang's stroke of genius. How amazingly audacious. Ye Qinghuan laughed quietly while also feeling extremely carefree. Didn't some people thought the late empress family had no one to rely on? Clearly Chang'an Palace still had Jingwang's protection. The Chang'an Palace would also definitely look after Jingwang on behalf of Empress Yao Hui. In a rare moment, Jingwang smiled in front of his cousin. Ye Qinghuan had gone to Yanyu Pavilion first. Jingwang followed behind after some time. Then, he took the gamble of returning to Changchun Palace to get his mother's memorial tablet. Sure enough, it was useful. In his opinion, if they were going to hit the second prince, then they should hit him hard enough that it would be difficult for him to make a comeback. Ye Qinghuan firmly agreed as well. It was unknown who was the person that disclosed this information to the king of Jinju. However, after the king of Jinju learned that the second prince plotted to harm his daughter, he became furious. The emperor hastily summoned Ye Qinghuan, this future son-in-law, to pacify the king of Jinju. Ye Qinghuan was originally going to return to Jingtai Palace together with Jingwang to get Xiongfeng. In the end, he had no choice but to change plans and head back. Jingwang went back by himself hurriedly. On the way, a black figure suddenly jumped out and in a moment of carelessness, bumped into Jingwang. Who was it? With furrowed brows, Jingwang examined the person before him. This person had their face covered with a mask, so it was impossible to see their appearance. Jingwang felt like this could possibly be someone sent by the second prince to take revenge, so he secretly grabbed the scabbard of his sword. The other person was stunned briefly. Seeing it was Jingwang, they immediately pulled out their sword and started attacking fiercely. The two people promptly got entangled in a fight. The masked person's fighting abilities were about the same as Jingwang, but perhaps because their hands that was holding their sword was injured, their movement was always one step slower. Jingwang very quickly knocked this person's sword to the ground. Yet unexpectedly, this person also caught Jingwang off guard and threw a bag of white powder in his face. Jingwang instantly couldn't see clearly when the powder got into his eyes. His sword also landed on the ground. Sensing that this person was drawing close, Jingwang scoffed and calmly pulled out the dagger hiding in his boot and hit his target with one blow. The fight happened in less than a quarter of an hour. The masked man received a serious injury and escaped. Jingwang's gait also staggered. He couldn't make a sound, however Jingtai Palace shouldn't be too far. Liu and Xiongfeng stared at each other, big eyes against small eyes, for an entire night. He also watched Xiongfeng chew non-stop, poke the fishbowl and wag its tail all night. Just as Liu was just about to fall asleep, Jingwang finally appeared. Wang Shi, who was guarding outside, felt a sense of relief. "Your Highness, you're finally back. Was it successful?" Jingwang shook his head. Wang Shi noticed his expression didn't look right, his eyes were reddened and his face still had residue of the powder. Wang Shi didn't know what happened and asked repeatedly. Jingwang's eyes were aching presently and couldn't write words, so he waved his hands non-stop, moving rather agitatedly. Wang Shi concluded that Jingwang was unwell and immediately said, "This servant will help you inside the room to rest and go find the imperial physician." Wang Shi thought that if Master Xiaoyu was present, and His Highness normally loved Master Xiaoyu the most, to stay together with the fish for a while might make him feel better. Therefore, he helped Jingwang into the room where the fish and dog were settled in. As soon as Jingwang entered the room, Xiongfeng wagged its tail even more and jumped over enthusiastically. Jingwang couldn't see clearly and accidentally stepped on the dog's tail. Xiongfeng pitifully whined a few times. "Xiongfeng, stop being noisy. He doesn't look very good." Liu was also swimming back and forth anxiously inside the porcelain fish bowl. When Jingwang returned, Liu was very happy and didn't even feel sleepy anymore. But Jingwang didn't seem to be all right. Why wasn't Wang Shi here? Liu wasn't aware that Wang Shi went to order people to summon the imperial physician. There were lit lanterns in the room, yet everything still looked blurry to Jingwang. After feeling about and sitting down, he felt his eyes were hurting and wanted to first find a handkerchief to give them a wipe. Liu caught a glimpse of Jingwang's red and swollen eyes and the residue of the white powder on his face. A thought flashed through his head quickly. Did Jingwang get hit by limestone powder? Seeing Jingwang blindly grabbing a piece of cloth next to the wash basin and about to dab it in water, Liu hastily said, You can't use water directly. If limestone powder was washed directly with water, it will burn his eyes. It might make him blind." This was a knowledge from the modern world. But no one could hear Liu's voice. The little carp swam erratically inside the fishbowl in panic, wishing that Jingwang could see it and stop what he was doing. However, at this time Jingwang only had time to focus on himself, so he didn't notice Liu. Wringing the cloth, he was just about to wipe his eyes with it. Liu wanted to ask Xiongfeng to do something. However, this stupid dog was sometimes reliable and sometimes not. Right now, it was only looking at Jingwang with its dog head tilted to the side. Perhaps Xiongfeng thought that Jingwang's clumsy movements were very entertaining. What to do? He will get blind. Jingwang was already mute, so he can't turn into a blind person as well, right? That would really be too unfortunate. Liu paused briefly. He clearly knew another way that would be effective in stopping Jingwang. Even if it was dangerous to himself, he had to do it. The little carp gathered his courage and jumped with all of his strength, leaping out of the fishbowl. Even though there were no teacups placed near the fishbowl and landing directly on the ground was a bit painful, it was fine. Jingwang just happened to have his back facing Liu. Liu quickly used his transformation skill and instantly changed back into human form. How to explain where he came from was no longer important, he'll figure it out after stopping Jingwang first. Don't wash it with water. Liu yelled loudly. The hand that Jingwang used to hold the wet cloth stiffened. He reflexively started to turn his head. This voice. He remembered, this was the youth that had kept evading him even after relentless pursuit for a long time. Why would he suddenly appear without any warning in this room? Jingwang was just about to turn around when Liu quickly said, "Don't turn around just yet. Please wait a second." Jingwang. After transforming, Liu was not wearing anything. Scrambling around hastily, he searched all over. However, this room where Wang Shi put them was strangely not only windowless, it also didn't contain any wardrobe. There were no clothes he could wear. Liu was extremely embarrassed. It's not like he could run around in front of people like this. Fortunately, even though there was no wardrobe inside this room, there were curtains hanging from the beams. There's no more time. It can only be this. Liu didn't bother with the color or texture and pulled down one randomly. Recklessly wrapping it around himself, he kept going until he wrapped himself like a tube before stopping. Jingwang stood straight, not daring to move. He heard the movements behind him. The young man hadn't left yet. However, he had a feeling that if he turned around, the young man might run away again. His eyes were not good now. It was better to stay calm and not scare the young man away, Jingwang thought to himself. Liu fixed the tube well and then finally said, "It's fine now." Jingwang swiftly turned around and vaguely saw a tube. Jingwang. Liu stood in front of him, explaining in a small voice, Your Highness, you definitely can't wash your eyes with water yet. Let me help you clean them, all right." End chapter.